So, we've been optimizing for efficiency, productivity, I think since the Industrial Revolution, thinking that would make us happy. And I think can all admit it has not. Because it's the sensorial nature of life that makes us feel alive. And I think we're craving to get out of our cognitive mind and more into our senses, and to connect our senses, our body and our mind together more. And the more senses that we aliven, the better. And I feel that the art of the future, Susan and I feel, the art of the future will be experiential and at times highly collaborative with technology. So we wanted to give you a taste of 6 projects. There's 6 projects that we wanted to share with you, and we wish we could have given these 6 projects 30 minutes each to have them tell you about it themselves. So this is going to be a poo-poo platter or an appetizer to get you excited. And 5 of the 6 artists are here. So after I give you a 2-minute snippet into these projects, I'll just have them stand up so you know who they are, and you can talk to them during the party. So many of these projects are either in the process of or have had scientific studies done on them, and the implications are very promising. They are musical sensory environments, colors in motion, these are the names of the projects, chambers of awe, dream machine, wave space, and sensory field. I feel like I'm at the Academy Awards, where you announce for best act, and the winner is, no, there is no winner. They're all winners. So the first one is Matthew Bennett. You may already, he's so distinguished looking. You probably know who he is. But who led sound design at Microsoft for 10 years, where he founded and directed the sound and sensory design program. His only mandate at that time was to help make the global soundscape of technology more functional and more beautiful. He left Microsoft in 2021 to focus full-time on developing something called musical sensory environments, as well as many other projects. But these sensory environments are for deep listening, mental health, and healing. And what I love about him is he approaches musical composition as sensory design based on the fundamental idea of sound as touch, quite literally sound as physical vibration and psychological energy that can be transformed and transcended. And what I really like about his work, you'll see I'm going to work up from the simple to the more complicated, is the simplicity of just seeing the energy of what you're hearing is so deeply immersive. So that gives you just a small sense of it. But this is Matthew. You stand up or raise your hand. Yeah. And he's doing many different kinds of things, but I think Sharon Salzberg says that art is the highest form of meditation. And what I like about that is I think it takes, one step further, because by looking at what you're hearing, I find myself falling into that state a lot easier. So this image is of 1,000 4x6 landscape paintings that were created over a 3-year period by an artist named Linda DeHart, who traveled around the world. And this is a dream of hers, to have them mounted on a 135-foot wall that she hopes to see happen in a healing space someday. She calls this piece a long walk in beauty, and they certainly are beautiful and powerful when seen slowly going from one to another to music, which I'm going to show you in a minute. But Linda joined up with Chris, and they created a company called Colors in Motion. And Colors in Motion create evocative audiovisual works of art in motion with a co-creative global collective of visual, sound, and performing arts. It's a uniquely designed digital art form that excels at breaking patterns of hyper-arousal by offering experiences that are calibrated to switch the brain's activity into the relaxed mode of the parasympathetic system. So these artworks are universally accessible to a variety of audiences, from the general public to those experiencing alienation and suffering, from people who are healing to those in hospice. And their library of digital artworks are mastered for large public screens and also versioned for smaller screens. It's really supposed to be it is an open-eyed meditation that inspires deep contemplation. And in contrast to traditional relaxation media, Colors in Motion consciously synchronize rich levels of visual abstraction, color, and sound through slowly transforming cadence that invites a dance between the hemispheres of the brain. So when watching and listening, frame by frame, note by note, the mind and body gently release into a flow state of resonant calm. And Chris is here. Where is Chris? Can you stand up? There's Chris. And these are now, they're licensing this to hospitals, and but it goes on for hours and hours, and you just get more and more, I think, mesmerized. There's something about the speed, and the images are just beautiful. This next one, Chambers of Awe, is an innovative multimedia media production company that combines the power of sound from using wisdom traditions and cutting-edge technology to facilitate awe-inducing experiences, inner transformations, and healing. At the heart of these productions are ceremonial musical instruments, and I've seen them all. They're from all over the world, from all periods of time. They're absolutely beautiful. And all designed to bridge the connection between the seen and the unseen worlds. I think I was talking to someone during lunch that my role, I believe, is making the invisible visible. I think that's what we have to do more and more. These instruments, combined with advanced audio technology and 360-degree visuals, facilitate a full spectrum sensory experience that resonates through the body at a cellular level. This video is an excerpt from a show that Laura did called Qualia, which is the latest immersive show for planetariums that Laura and Sarah, who's a sound alchemist, created. When you're in a planetarium space and this is all around you and you're leaning back and these ancient instruments, it's just incredibly transformational. Laura and Sarah. Yeah, as you see, we're moving into these, I think these full body experiences where you're alivening multi-senses is going to become incredibly common and important. The next is Dream Machine, which is an immersive experience that takes its audience on a kaleidoscopic journey through light and sound, all experienced this time through closed eyes. The experience is actually inspired by an extraordinary but little-known invention by an artist-inventor, Brian Gysin, back in 1959. And he was a poet, a writer, and a painter, kind of part of the Beat generation. And he had a chance encounter on a bus that led him to discovering the phenomena of flickering lights on closed eyes. He created a homemade device to recreate that effect he had on the bus, and he had hoped at the time that it would replace TV in every home, but unfortunately it just remained a cult object. But 40 years later, artistic director Jennifer Crook stumbled upon a secondhand book about the Dream Machine as a teenager, and she had realized its untapped potential and what could happen if you took the phenomena as a basis for a larger collective experience. As you shut your eyes, you experience this kaleidoscopic world of colors, patterns, and shapes. So it's just caused by the flickering light, and so these images of what's in your mind come forward. And the Dream Machine also has a 360-degree spatial sound score by musician John Hopkins. The whole experience is like a light show in your mind. Once the experience has finished, all the participants are invited to share what they saw or felt through a drawing or a conversation. I actually did this in London. Jennifer came all the way from London. But audiences describe these profound experiences, and people really want to share their experiences and are fascinated by the differences and similarities between them. What's interesting is actually Jennifer, through this, has 20,000 drawings, which is the largest collection of publicly generated art in the world.
We're inviting people to come in and really go on an inner journey together. They make the show, their brain makes the show.
So we're really making something that is internal and quite transcendental and personal into a collective experience.
We're investigating a phenomenon that's still not widely understood, how flickering light generates this vivid, immersive range of experiences for people.
It's just an extraordinary journey of the mind.
I'd been told it was just white light, and I thought, how can I be seeing all these colours and shapes?
My experience felt like a journey through life. I saw planets, I saw everything. I felt I could touch it.
It saw the entire universe go by behind my own closed eyes.
When people come out of the Dream Machine, they will have all sorts of ways to reflect on their experience and share their experience with others.
I have hopes that lots of people who haven't actually thought about their own minds before in this way will become fascinated by it.
I'm not normally a deep and meaningful kind of person, but I do feel like I've had some form of release.
Increasingly, we absorb culture in very isolated individual ways. The opportunity to break that open and to create a cultural experience that isn't about consumption, that is about self-generation and reflection is extremely exciting.
If you come to the Dream Machine, you will experience something that you will probably remember for the rest of your life.
Jennifer actually told me something here that a blind woman actually saw colors. Jennifer, where are you in the audience? There she is. All the way from, thank you so much for coming from London. You know, Susan and I both believe that at one end, psychedelics have a place in the world for certain situations and conditions, but we believe many of these kinds of art projects will become something that the masses can have a transformational experience. Just two more quickly. Wave space is a mesmerizing installation created by artist Lachlan Tarazan. He launched it at the Milan Design Week in 2023. And there is a, what it is a dark room with a, where water reveals intricate light projections on a large disc overhead. And again, guests lean back, and there's a 10-minute custom choreographed music harmonized with the science of cymatics, which is a vibrational phenomena of making sound visible. I don't know if you know that, but about that science, but really the music is, in this case, he designed this whole system, but coming through the water and then reflected up on this big dome, so you actually feel like you're in the water. And the continuous interaction, the water moves, the light plays differently, and the fact that we are 70% water, witnessing how water moves through sound added to this transformational experience. I'll just give you a little taste. If you can crank the music up a little bit. So these are the patterns in the water that are created by the music. And you're like in under this. To cut that off, but but you can now understand why, if that's what sound does to water, and we're 70% water, the words we say to each other, the music we play, what's going on at a cellular level inside our body, what we're singing. You know, I think the ancients knew that they were giving their cells sonic massage just by chanting and singing. So our last, oh, and sorry, Lachlan could not be here with us. The last project is by a group called Chroma. And Chroma started as a collaborative studio and research lab formed by installation and multimedia artist Harriet and Johanna Giordani, with sound artists and musicians Orfeo McCord and Joel Shearer in 2019. Chroma is a cultural impact enterprise that creates immersive light and sound experiences to inspire expanded states of awareness and connection. The picture you're seeing here is one of their projects called Satellite One. It's in Venice, California. If you're ever there, I recommend you go experience it. It's their first local site in a planned network of a number of locations that are going to open to the public. So this is one of those experiences I think in the future, you know, instead of going to the movies, you'll pay to have these 20-minute experiences. Many guests have come multiple times for this 20-minute experience, even coming once a week in place of their psychologist appointment, right? They said it was more effective in alleviating stress. Chroma installations are synesthetic experiences where participants see, sound, and hear light. It's a full-body immersion into a curvilinear space that appears boundless and infinite from within. And the melding of sensory modalities blurs boundaries between physical and perceived realities, suspending participants in time and space. So these satellites are permanent local neighborhood sites built into existing architecture where participants can form a practice around this supersensory chromosonic experiences for improved well-being. The findings of a recent scientific study support the potential of chromosonic immersions as a unique and effective tool for enhancing psychological well-being, cognitive function, and physiological state. The the study observed improvements in mood, reductions in anxiety, enhancements in mindfulness, and promotion of relaxation, suggesting promising applications for this immersive experience in various contexts, including mental health, stress management, and overall well-being. this other project, and this will be the last thing, is called Sensory Field. It's a light and sound installation composed of 21 translucent nodes that create an array of interrelated spaces. Each scrimmed area in this multi-layered setting is activated by a single source of light and spatialized sound. As light ebbs and flows through the space, algorithmically connected sound waves fill the atmospheric environment. This installation was just launched in April in Milan, Italy, to critical acclaim. Johannes and Heidi. The last thing I want to say is in their study, what was fascinating is there was 47% incidence of a complete mystical experience observed within the group that went through their satellite experience as compared to the control group. And high-dose psilocybin administration is usually 58 to 67%. So the fact that mushrooms will, 58 to 67% of people have a highly mystical experience, and yet experiencing this piece of art, I'll call it, created a 47% of the people had that mystical experience. Is pretty damn close. Anyway, I would like to now, throughout the day, you've heard of the incredible research and practices that are happening in neuroarts, and in this final session, Susan and the panel are going to bring it all together to share the tangible ways the field is coalescing and accelerating around the world. And then we're going to indoctrinate you all to take it out.
Okay, this is amazing. So I love the line that Van said, civilization is an act of imagination. That's just so beautiful to me. And for many of you that were there last night, I shared that for me, looking around the room, it was like a dream. I couldn't believe seeing all of you together in one place where mostly I see you on this little square space on my computer. And today for me has been a transcendent experience. It's been an emotional journey. It's been a lucid dream, I think. I think we've gone in and out of art in so many ways, and we've heard about so many different art forms. But I'm going to get really down to practical business right now, because you've seen the power of the arts. We wanted you to feel the power of the arts and all of the conversations and immersions that we've had today. And we wanted to share with you the breadth of really what's possible. But this is not a soft science. This is not a soft sort of nice to have. This is a have to have. And we're really deadly serious about building a field that lasts over the next 150 years plus. And so what I want to talk about today is a bit about how this field is really emerging. And you heard a little bit from some of the different labs, but I wanted to share a couple of slides on the work that I do at Hopkins and how this is sort of morphed into a much larger initiative. So at my lab at Hopkins, it's called the International Arts and Mind Lab, Center for Applied Neuroaesthetics. And our lab started, and I believe the absolute momentum of this field has happened because of a single person named Marilyn Peterson. Marilyn Peterson came to Johns Hopkins and she said, my family would like to give money in brain science. We want to understand how the brain works, but what we really want to understand is how the arts change us, because we would think the arts can save us. And I'm in the School of Medicine, and any of you in schools of medicine know that they were scratching their heads saying, yeah, okay, well, we have art on the wall, and we have portraits of old white guys. But what do we really know about the arts? So I was in the School of Ed. I was invited to come down and meet with folks. And what I learned very quickly was that she was right. And so we've spent the last, this was in 2007, so we've spent the last almost 20 years really working to understand how the arts change our brains and bodies and what this neuroaesthetics field looks like and what the field of neuroarts looks like. So very briefly, we work in 4 areas, including research, field building, community building, and also outreach and education. And we do lots of different types of research, and I won't go into any of these other than to say we've been very interested in developing foundational approaches, theories of change, logic models on how we can study the arts in all these different ways. So whether that's neurobiology, whether that's lived experience, indigenous culture, how do we create interdisciplinary approaches to doing that? 2 projects that we're very interested in and 2 that we're really expanding over the next 5 years. One is in what we call intentional spaces, where Michael spent a little bit of time talking about the power of space for us to change space, but also for space to change us. We're in space all the time. And if it's not physical space, it's virtual space, as Ivy just beautifully showed us. And so what do we know about this space and how it changes us, and how can it really enhance humanity? And then the other is one that I'm passionately interested in, and that is mental well-being. And that's mental well-being across the lifespan. So we right now are in a very interesting US program where we're talking with youth. We're looking at youth voice to really help us understand what youth wants to know and what youth needs to know. So as part of the journey as in field leadership, about 5 years ago, we started working with the Aspen Institute to really take the pulse of the global community around this idea of coalescing everybody anywhere that was doing something with the arts. And so the NeuroArts Blueprint really is designed to be able to build the field. And a couple things that we have done over the last 2 years in an implementation plan, and this is a really big deal. Right now, if you wanted to talk to people in public health or in neurology, or you wanted to meet with people with lived experience, you got to figure out how to find them, and it's one-on-one. The NeuroArts Resource Center is a global watering hole where anybody, anywhere in the world will be able to come beginning this fall, where you can find each other, you can share information, you can find grants, you can find jobs if you're looking for a job, you can find researchers, you can find other practitioners who are studying some of the same things that you're really interested in solving for. So it's super exciting. Renée Fleming's going to talk a bit about this, but Renée, through her generosity and I think real insight, has started something called the Renée Fleming Investigator Award. We are doing a lot of work in communities, hyper-local communities, and that's really where the action is. And so we have something called the Community NeuroArts Coalitions we have 3 now, one in Kansas City, one in Palm Beach, and in New York City. And that's going to be expanding dramatically over the next 6 months as we launch a field guide. But if everybody still has their whackers and eggs, I'd like everyone to just give me a big drum roll if you can. More, 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 more. Yeah, like you mean it. Okay. The Music Man Foundation this week has given the NeuroArts Blueprint $1 million. It is our largest grant to date, and it will allow us to create 2 things. One is called the NeuroArts Education Network. So we're bringing universities, community colleges, anybody that's creating educational opportunities and research anywhere in the world around this field to begin to start to create the tent pole for an academic runway. And we're extremely excited for this to happen. And the executive director, Sarah, is here. So please thank Sarah for making such a generous and really ambitious opportunity and investment to build this field, because we can all talk to each other and we can talk about this, but the reality is we need to make it sustainable. And without the sustainability, we're going to be talking to ourselves over and over again, and I just can't stress that enough. And so my last slide is to say that the NeuroArts Blueprint is an amazing initiative, but like all initiatives, they happen in community, and they happen with so many organizations, from AARP to the World Bank to Americans for the Arts to NEA and to NIH and all the others that you see here, and so many more. So I'd like to pass this over to our next speaker, who is going to talk a little bit about the NEA and the great work that they are doing. So thank you.
This is so inspiring all day, hasn't it been? Really great stuff. Really, it's an honor to be here with you all. I'm at the National Endowment for the Arts, which is the lead federal arts agency in the government, where we support equitable opportunities for arts participation of all types, all kinds of arts throughout the country, as well as arts education and creativity in general. And we also, we also have a research office. I mean, I'm the director of it, so so it's some proof we do. But the point about that is that a lot of people don't know that, in fact, for many years, for a decade or more now, we've been really conducting and supporting studies around the arts, the value and impact of the arts for individuals and for communities, looking at not only health and social and emotional development, executive function, some of those things that were talked about, but also cognition and learning across the lifespan, social cohesion, entrepreneurship and innovation, and community development, just to name a few of things that we're trying to understand better how the arts contribute materially to those kinds of outcomes. And we can only do that really by relying on our grantees, and also relying on, believe it or not, other federal agencies. Because one of the things that's really, you learn really fast when you're relatively small, but federal agency, you try to be nimble and agile, but you really learn a lot by ponying up with other, larger agencies like National Institutes of Health has been mentioned, but also the U.S. Census Bureau, Bureau of Economic Analysis, National Science Foundation, Department of Education, and many more, where we tried to sneak in, or I guess it's overt, questions about the arts and try to really help to bridge our research agendas so that we can share a common mission for the American people. So we're actually really getting the most out of all of our investments in all these federal agencies by trying to understand how best we can study the arts, using their resources as well as ours. And it's worked, some great stuff has come out of it. So I just wanted to say that what you all are doing here, and I want to thank Susan, Ivy, and Diana, because this is this kind of community we are creating here. We're trying to do this at the federal level with our federal partners as well. So we do have a lot of publications on our website, arts.gov, where we've studied things like, some of this is featured in actually Susan and Ivy's book, Arts in Early Childhood. Dr. Melinda Menzer from our office is quoted in the book, and work on arts and aging. We did work on arts and the opioid crisis. There's a lot of great stuff here, really empirical research that we try to pull together, often with our federal partners. And we also have a program called Creative Forces, which I think is also referenced in the book, which is a program we work with the U.S. Departments of Defense and Veterans Affairs, looking at really how we can serve military-connected populations through creative arts therapy. And also, increasingly, just last week, we announced awards to dozens of communities out there to not only in the clinical setting, but in community-based arts or community or arts organizations to really serve military-connected populations combating trauma issues. The great thing there is we have a clinical research agenda and also evaluation studies that are ongoing, that are in partnership with the Departments of Defense and Veterans Affairs. So again, you see this leveraging of other federal resources. But I'm really proud to announce or say that we have a couple of grant programs, and we'll be rolling out early next year application guidelines. So one of my big asks is for those of you who are eligible, nonprofit organizations or research universities or even school districts or tribal nations, think about applying to the NEA for support to study the very things we've been talking about. I also say we have a research grants program, which is kind of a one and done, you do a study and we support it. Also, the other one is the research labs, where we bring together transdisciplinary teams. And one of the things we heard, I think, Anjan say is, this thing about neither fish or fowl, and we really are trying to cover some of that space through transdisciplinary research. So I just wanted to say here that some of the people you've seen have been grantees of ours, very proud of them, Girija, Anjan, Jill, and Charles, for example. I'll just kind of end on, I wanted a couple of things. Sound health, it's the Sound Health Partnership, which I think Renee is probably going to mention, she's been really instrumental in, and truly with Dr. Francis Collins and Deborah Rudder from the Kennedy Center in helping us get farther with this kind of federal leveraging I'm talking about. So you know about the work that NIH has done in terms of investing in music and health, music and science, and NEA has been proud to be part of that effort. But we have something called the Sound Health Network, which is also a national resource center and a convener of people working in this field. So I encourage you to check out the Sound Health Network, led by some of the folks, trying to get this here, led by some of the, not led by him, but be kind of cool, wouldn't it? Eventually, yes, indeed. So Sarah Thompson and the others here, Julian Johnson, Charles we saw, and others, and Indre, it's really a dream team, and we've been really privileged to work with them. So I encourage you to look at that, and there are a lot of resources there. I wanted to just end on, I know I'm probably run out of time, real quick, just to point out two things. Our chair has been working with the Secretary Becerra at Department of Health and Human Services. We met back in January. There's a big summit, Healing, Bridging, Thriving, which you can see online, where the Surgeon General over there with our chair, Dr. Maria Rosario Jackson, worked on really promoting arts, belonging, and social connectedness. And so that's now very much part of our work. And so you'll be seeing more initiatives roll out from that. I'll end here. I'm not going to have time for this, so hopefully this will be something we can cover in the chat. But I do hope we can get to some of this. It speaks to some of you are taking pictures. That's very flattering. But just because I think these are some of the things, I don't know if it's a roadmap per se, but these are observations I've made from working at this for a fairly long time with my really amazingly more talented colleagues here. And I think there's definitely some needs there we need to cover, maybe in the discussion. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Tooshar Swain with Americans for the Arts. My ask for you is I want to know your story. My story is that my father passed away just 9 days ago, and his service was yesterday. Susan, your team has just been incredible, being so flexible to allow me to be here, which has allowed me to be here. And my dad was an emergency trauma physician, did that for 35 years. The stuff that we're talking about here today wouldn't have even crossed his mind until he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2007. He realized that he had to seek some self-help, focus on himself, and I think once the rat race was over, he began to open his mind to new therapies, often using music therapy, dance therapy, with his physical therapy team, his occupational therapy team, etc. And for me, I have a small story in this too, is that I've heard Susan talk about visual art and how it helps you identify some of the emotional complexities that you're dealing with. And I was doing that same thing. I was in the ICU, and I kept looking at this one picture. It's a picture with trees, and it over a stream, and you can see the reflection of the trees. And while I was doodling, I kept realizing that I was drawing it from the bottom up. And it hit me that perhaps I was doing that because my life felt a little upside down, still feels a little upside down. But as I continue to draw up, I realized that that's not going to last forever, and I'm going to be right side up. Why do I tell that story other than some free therapy that I thank you for indulging me in? Is that at Americans for the Arts, we have a mantra that we go by: no story without data, and no data without a story. And you have been enriched with, you've been enriched actually with some tremendous stories today, but you've also been enriched with some great data on this issue. And I think that it's important to just not forget the stories, because the stories are what make your human connection whenever you're advocating to a lawmaker, to a policymaker. It also helps your advocacy efforts because you're more passionate about what you are advocating for, and lawmakers, policymakers, whomever you're talking to advocate for this, they understand that, they see it, and it's infectious on them as well. But there is also the data. I just want to talk, we've been talking a lot about neuroarts. We have also been focusing, want to just have under your tool belt the economic side of things. We follow closely the Bureau of Economic Analysis. I know that Sunil, your group has a lot of impact on this. The GDP for the arts and culture and nonprofit sector now tops $1.102 trillion. That's above that of construction and transportation, some typical powerhouse sectors, over 5.2 million jobs. And it represents a full 4.31% of the nation's GDP. We have our own study, the nonprofit arts study called the Arts and Economic Prosperity 6, which indicated to us that $151.7 billion in industry spending supports, over 2.5 million jobs, and over $25 billion in government revenue. I'll just touch on this quickly. We are a network of networks. It is not just us at the national level who is doing great work. We work with U.S. regional arts agencies, state arts agencies that are created by legislatures and governors, and really local arts agencies that are the intermediaries in serving artists and arts organizations. And then finally, just briefly on our advocacy agenda, and the reason why I bring it up is that the NeuroArts Blueprint and all of the work that we're doing, that we're talking about here today, serves as an advocacy tool for these issues. Sunil talked about creative forces. Well, we've been working to try to advocate for that within both the Department of Defense and the Department of Veterans Affairs, who have actually used the NeuroArts Blueprint as an advocacy tool. We're able to get $10 million within the Department of Defense's Office of Morale, Welfare, Recreation for community arts engagement for the next fiscal year. And then trying to do the same thing within the veterans, the Department of Veterans Affairs, and then finally arts education. We need to continue to advocate for arts education because, ironically, it was arts education that saved so many of our students during the pandemic, and that's what's being unfortunately chipped away at right now because of the perceived need of remedial learning and learning loss in other subjects. Hopefully we can talk a little bit more about this, but that's all for now. Thank you for having me.
Wow. I have learned so much. This has been incredible. Thank you, Susan and Ivy and Diana. It's really incredible. I know I only have 5 minutes. I'm really pissed. I have so many things that I have shared, I have learned from all of you. But I'm only going to take 5 minutes because we're all such a community of people from all different walks of life. It's incredible. And so this evening when we're gathering together, it's really important to share again, and we want to preserve that time together. So I just pressed this button. I'm going to talk to you about mainly one thing, Brain Health Action, but I wanted to tell you that I work at ARP. For some of you who don't know what ARP is, we are just the initials, so we're a lot like the artist Prince. Do you remember when he only went to the symbol? We're just the symbol, the 4 letters. But I work for ARP, and what I do is policy. I try to use policy as a tool for fostering brain health, because ARP is trying to ensure that people, that your money, your health, and your happiness last as long as you do. Now, a lot of people think about ARP as an aging organization, and that's what we are. We are trying to advocate for people 50 and older. But there is something I know about each and every one of you. We come from all different disciplines and walks of life, but there is something true about every one of you in this room, and we all share this. Every single one of it. Can you think what it might be? We're all aging, and that is an amazing thing. That is the greatest achievement of mankind. It is not something to fear and dread. We have been successful that medicine and health have got us to the point where we have the privilege of aging. And many of you, 50 and older, you have half of your lives left to live, to enjoy, to thrive, like the arts will allow you to do. So I wanted to say, what is brain health action? It is an idea. It's a social movement. The idea that we are all here together collectively to change something that most people think about aging, which is that they believe that cognitive decline is inevitable as you age. Well, it's not. We know many people who live and thrive into old age, 90s and 100s now, is becoming relatively commonplace. In fact, that's the oldest growing demographic in the United States. But people don't know what are the two things that they stand in their way of getting better brain health: not knowing what works and the people around them. So what brain health action is designed to do is to think about how are we going to pull the different sectors together to have a multi-year initiative to change this conversation. And we need each and every sector. We need music, art, and design, because that's how we're going to thrive. That's how we're going to create the environments where people want to be. We need employers, and we need economics. We haven't talked a lot about money here, other than we need it. But if we don't make the economic arguments from a policy perspective, you can forget it. We have to be able to convince our leaders that the economics behind what we're talking about work. And that's one of the reasons that Susan and I and others, Andrea, are working together to make the case about the economic case around arts and music in particular. So what will the Brain Health Action Collaborative do? We will bring together this narrative. We heard Van talking about if you're going to change anything, you've got to change the narrative. Well, you have to speak a common language. So sharing messages together, creating and sharing content with each other to make it relevant to each other. We have to partner and reshape the narrative. So ARP's got lots of resources. We have the world's largest circulating magazine, yes, in the world. We are bringing scientists together to talk about the state of the evidence, and then we need to share these messages out in simple terms, because unfortunately, maybe people in this room read 25-page reports, nobody else does. So we're bringing it to the people. So ARP is sponsoring the Stones tour. Now, think about guys who have abused their brains, but look at how resilient they are. And that's what we're talking about here. So what we're doing is we're doing activations in 15 markets where we're showing the relationship between music and brain health. Now, I want everybody to sing with me. You might not get what you want. You might not get what you want. You try sometimes, you just might get what you need. And that's what we're doing here. We're proving we need the arts for society. So look, we can't do everything, but I want you all to think about this. Will you join us collectively? We need the engineers, the scientists, the researchers, the musicians, the artists to join together, and we ask you to go to brainhealthaction.org and send us your ideas, because we are not going to be able to do this alone. We have to show what all of you are doing, and we have to do it together. And art and music is the way that we do that for people of all ages, all across the lifespan. So thank you so much. I hope that we stay in touch and you join the social movement in order to make this happen.
Thank you. Sarah, I was going to sing with everybody, but forget it now. No, I had a really good song. Never mind. So I just thought you might wonder why I'm here. I was an incredibly shy kid, and somehow I ended up as a performer against my better judgment and instincts and personality. So I had bouts of stage fright all along because I felt so judged and so uncomfortable. I also had a terrible success conflict. So as my star became very high is when I had the worst period. But then I discovered as I was trying to unpack this and figure out why I also had pain as a symptom, really debilitating pain until I walked on stage. I thought, this is not real. Something is really weird here. So I discovered the mind-body connection, and I started reading everything that I could find, which was a lot in the newspaper all of a sudden, because researchers were studying music. So fast forward, I met Dr. Francis Collins, obviously the director of the National Institutes of Health for 12 years, at a dinner party. And this was in 2015. And this wasn't just any dinner party. There were 3 Supreme Court justices there, and it was 2 days after the marriage equality decision. That's all I'm going to tell you about that party. You'll have to read it. He writes it in this book in the foreword. But it was a tense night, and we basically relaxed by playing music together and singing together, and nobody noticed that we were singing "The Times They Are A-Changin'." So then I had just been appointed advisor to the Kennedy Center, and I said, you know, I think that the audience would love to know about the science of what happens to us when we're experiencing art and engaging with art, and in this case, music. And do you think that we could work together, these 2 national institutes? And he said yes, and since the National Institutes of Health have funded $40 million for music research, which is a massive game changer and a validation of the work that people have been doing for a long time. They've just added dance, mainly because of Dance for PD, which has been an inspiration to everybody. And my hope is that eventually we'll be funding all of the arts. It's about technology and measurement. So this has been an exciting project, and I have also met Susan and Bruce Katz, and NeuroArts has become a massive inspiration to me because of the larger umbrella, the vision, the incredible blueprint, and so I'm really excited to be working with you on all of that. The book, just let me tell you briefly, has 41 chapters. It's an anthology. There are 8 artist chapters: Rhiannon Giddens, Esperanza Spalding, Ben Folds, Roseanne Cash, harrowing chapter, and more, Yo-Yo Ma, but also institutes, and 7 presenters today actually have chapters in the book, including Susan. So it could be a kind of an introduction to arts and health, a textbook. So my whole thing since all of this has been about advocacy. I've been so passionate about what you all are doing, which inspires me deeply, and I just want to share it with the public. So, and I think about ways that we can do that. One is that I am still touring all over the world, and right now a project with National Geographic. And so I bring this message everywhere I go and offer it to performing arts presenters. I say, do you want this Music in Mind presentation, and can you supply me with scientists, local scientists, and healthcare providers, and I'll bring the audience. And it's been really successful, and people are engaged. And now they're so engaged because I think the message from Your Brain on Art has gotten around, and people are saying now, not just, oh, that's interesting, they're saying, what can we do? So one thing that I thought, and talked to Susan about, which we've already done, as she mentioned, are the Investigator Awards. And so these are, this is our unbelievably esteemed panel that Susan and Ruth and our co-chairs have worked to put together. And then we have our first winners this year. And these are scientists who pair with artists, and they are an extraordinary group of young people. Anjan Chatterjee is actually on one of them, so I'm a huge fan. Anjan has a gorgeous chapter in the book too. But I would love to grow these. This is an ask. I would love to grow. This is from my small foundation, the number of awards that we can give and double and triple them in the next couple of years, because this is our pipeline. This is the pipeline. This is a pipeline that values what we artists bring to the table. Thank you for mentioning that earlier, because I do think we have a place at the table because we're curious. We have so many of the same qualities as scientists. So this has been very exciting, but Art Care is another initiative that we've been talking about, something that we'd really love to bring by zip code to either big box stores or an insurance company to connect people to the existing plentiful arts organizations who are offering services for children with special needs and caregivers and patients with dementia. So you can definitely help us with this, because it's a plan that has a lot already in place, but it still has to happen. So, and then I'll leave you with my funnest inspiration, and I didn't even need to say anything, just watch this little video.
Daddy's gonna play them a little song while they're eating their peas.
You guys ready?
I feel like I should take another picture of this room. It's still so full. Fabulous. So we've got about 10 minutes left between you and a really beautiful bottle of wine. So we want to just sort of bring this home a little bit. You know, as I said, we've talked about so many ideas, but what we're really, I think the folks on this stage are really making those ideas a reality. And so, Sarah, I'd love to start with you. You work in policy at AARP. Can you talk about some of the policies that you're really trying to push through right now?
So, starting with the idea that you get what you pay for, finding mechanisms to pay and sustain brain-healthy activities and therapies, to include the arts and music. So thinking for people living with dementia, for people who are caring for people with dementia, thinking about a sustainable payment mechanism that can facilitate these incredibly important therapies for people in ways that support their well-being. You know, there is a lot of money being spent in the pharmaceutical industry on things that are not terribly effective and do nothing to improve quality of life. We know that music, we know that art, all the things that you've seen, dance, can make a tremendous difference. The comparative effectiveness of these interventions, we're trying to prove that as quickly as possible so we can get to the point where it is absolutely important to pay for these therapies in ways that will help. And also thinking about how, from a public health perspective, we can get music and arts and other interventions for risk reduction. Because we can't treat our way out of this issue. With an aging population, we need to reduce risk by what we know works and finding ways to prove that that is an effective use of taxpayer dollars.
And will you just talk briefly about the economic analyses that you've sponsored?
Yeah, so we worked with the NeuroArts Blueprints Aspen Health Arts and Mind Lab to establish what was the economic benefit to music therapy as a dementia treatment. And Andrea, help me with the numbers. Are you still here? Is Andrea here? We found that we not only saved tax dollars in dementia treatment, but we added money to the economy by paying for music therapy. And we looked at various cases of low, middle, and high needs, and it was astonishing. Andrea, if you know the numbers off the top of your head, I'm sorry, I'm so wiped. I don't have them. 830 million to GDP.
So the economic argument really matters and will matter more and more.
And now we're trying to look at it not just from a dollar perspective, but we're trying to look at, does it actually add to quality of life? And that's the study we're engaging in right now.
Amazing. Tooshar, I'd love to have you talk a little bit about what you're doing in education, because we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about education, we're talking about public health. Can you talk a little bit about the policy strategies for education?
Yeah, sure. So arts education took a huge hit during the pandemic. A lot of the reason was, particularly on the music side, the blowing of instruments was seen as unsafe, and I think that it's a tribute to the arts education community that they actually backed a lot of the work that they did. Or their advocacy to get music back in the classrooms again, they base that on science, but it's still taken a hit. And I mentioned a little bit that because of remedial learning, and we saw through the nation's report card that there's been severe learning loss in the areas of math and reading, and of course those are all things that we strongly support and we need to, as a country, get back or get better at. But that shouldn't be at the expense of music and arts education. There was a lot of loss there, and to the point that I kind of made earlier was that it was the pandemic, or it was for many music and arts that really gave happiness and hope to kids during that time, because a lot of the things that we're talking about here today.
So, Sunil, I'd love for you to walk us through a little bit about the roadmap for the future.
Well, I think there are two things. One is at the federal level, we're trying to, we've actually set up a committee with, as I mentioned, Secretary Becerra at HHS and a lot of other federal agencies looking at, it's called the Arts Health, it's a working group, interagency working group on arts, health, and civic infrastructure, because we really are trying to, again, have that aligned mission with these various agencies to invest wisely in the arts and culture and design as part of larger, to further all of our outcomes. But one thing I wanted to comment on is with the research, so roadmap-wise, I guess, research, I strongly believe, and I think, it was a great report you all did on the Alzheimer's patients and the cost savings. I think with research, as you know, you often need replicable data. Like we need more of that. We need large-scale prospective studies with populations of all of us represented in it. I'm not saying that study or any other study. I just think we all need more larger studies. And that's something this community can certainly help with, getting us on the same page. And that involves standardizing outcomes, standardizing measures, finding core components of these arts interventions and programs that can be replicated. And I just want to add, our chair says the arts are important, full stop. But this is needed, as you pointed out eloquently, for policymakers, and both for arts, for health, and for education, they still require that kind of rigor and reproducibility.
Well, and I think that's a really interesting point, because, we have to figure out whose rules we're playing by, right? And so I totally believe in rigor and replication. But because the arts are so generous and the way you study them is so complex, I think there still needs to be new rules written about what is a randomized control study look like, right? So there's still a lot more there.
And I was going to say, and that's where the other thing in my roadmap slide was, I think that's where the artists come in, right? Like you said, and community members. I mean, being more attentive to what the community wants and the artists, and bringing them alongside with the researchers, or rather bringing the researchers alongside them, so that we can have a better paradigm. You know, I think for now we're kind of playing by those rules, as you say.
So Renée, you have been so philanthropic, and you've also been such an advocate. And the work that we're talking about today, we've heard a lot of folks from the United States, but there are several people here from around the world who are advancing this work. And this work is global. And in other countries, frankly, they're much further ahead than we are because they have socialized medicine. They have a commitment to the arts for street performers, for performing arts, for other ways of using the arts, for social prescribing. And so I think it's really important to say that this is a global enterprise. But Renée, I'd love for you to talk about this sort of hybrid model of resources from philanthropy, from high net worth individuals, but also from federal, state, local funding, and how you really see that happening around kind of a mosaic of ways that this really gets advanced.
Well, right now it's the only way it's being advanced, because so much of what we have, even in healthcare, is philanthropically supported. And until we have licensure for creative arts therapists in every state, right now there are only 12 that offer it to music therapists. We just won't get there unless it is philanthropic. So I think it's incredibly important. But also the advocacy, the resource center that you're going to open up in September, which is global, is crucial, because then we can begin to see what best practices are in other countries. But I know a little bit about it. They kind of say, ho hum, if it works, we just do it. We have a completely different system here. So the Sound Health Network, thank you for talking about that, Sunil, has also been useful here, because until then, everything was being replicated and nobody knew what anyone else was doing. But I think an advocacy piece from all of us banding together, or interested parties making a louder noise together, would be incredibly useful. I mean, we're talking about a documentary series. We're talking about, you know, some ways of messaging to the public. Some of the things that we heard today are so convincing and awe-inspiring, and they're things that the general public is completely unaware of. So I think that would be something to discuss.
So with one of the really important things that this Music Man Foundation gift is going to allow us to do is to create collective messages and communication strategies on our way to policy, so that we all are working together. And we've started something called the Bright Eyed Coalition, which are all of these organizations around the country and around the world that are lining on messaging in a really beautiful way to really start to move that into policymakers. So Bill Bradley, if you know any policymakers, we really are really interested in beginning to start those conversations. And also, I'll say, with funders, with funding organizations, you know, science funders fund science, health funders fund health, and art funders fund arts. And we need them to start to be able to work with each other and understand the multiplying effect. So with that, I just want to say thank you all so much for your insights.